Hey guys, Alternate Styles Galaxy here, this amazing what if video today. And to just let you guys know that there'll be some announcements in the outro, which will include the announcement of someone else's incredible what if idea. But otherwise, enjoy the video. Our story begins on the planet of Jedha. Cal Kestis, Bode Akuna, Cere Junda, Eno Cordova, Grease Dridus, and Merid were in a meeting. Bode had been planning to betray the Mantis Crew in order to protect his daughter Cere Junda and to find out which Inquisitor killed his wife Tayala Akuna. While he desperately felt like he needed to do this, he was very conflicted as he had gained such a deep friendship with Cal Kestis, as he saw him as a best friend. He also had overheard Cal informing Cere that Cal had killed the Knight's sister on Coruscant, which was very impressive to be able to kill an Inquisitor, considering Bode wasn't even able to do that. If Cal could defeat an Inquisitor, then perhaps he could help Bode defeat Link Denvik, which could mean that Cere could be kept safe. So he asked Cal if he could talk to him privately, which Cal said the words, "Of course." So now Cal and Bode were privately talking, and Cal asked what was wrong, as he could sense there was something going on. Bode asked Cal if he could trust him, like truly trust him. Could Cal promise that he and his daughter would be going to Tanalorr with the Jedi? Cal stated to Bode that he had his word, so Bode reluctantly revealed that he was secretly working for the Empire, because he was trying to find the Inquisitor that murdered his wife, and his daughter was aboard a secret space station hidden in the asteroids, where she was kind of being held hostage. So Bode, noticing Cal's alertness, explained to Cal that while he did lie about not working for the Empire, him seeing Cal as a best friend was not a lie. So he further explained that he overheard Cal talking about how he defeated the Knight's sister, he wanted to keep his daughter safe, and didn't entirely trust the Empire, but he didn't feel like he had much other choice. Cal could understand what it was like to not want to lose everything you have. So he promised Bode that they would go save his daughter first, and then escape to Tanalorr together, with the rest of the Jedi. Bode agreed to this. So Cal would let Cere know that he and Bode had one more mission they needed to attend to. Cere wasn't sure about this, but would trust Cal regardless. So Bode and Cal would take the Mantis and the Z-95 starfighter to sneak into the Imperial base in order to rescue Cere, which they would, killing most of the Imperial garrison and Denvik too, as they didn't realize that Bode would be back so soon, and they didn't get time to know that he hadn't betrayed the Jedi yet. After that, the Akunas and Cal would escape to Tanalorr with the hidden path on Jedha. The path to getting to Tanalorr was a little bit rough, but they eventually learned how to flow with the path to Tanalorr, not against it. Now, towards Cere, Cal and Bo would be the only ones who knew of Cere, just for the sake of her safety, as Cal promised. Bode and Cere would stay in a separate area on the planet until Bode felt it was safe to introduce her to the other Jedi. Cal would be allowed to visit, however, as Bode trusted Cal, especially after assisting him in rescuing Cere. And not to mention, Cal literally ended up guaranteeing her safety. Obviously, he didn't entirely trust Cal to the point of blind loyalty, but it was enough to keep him from betraying the other Jedi, as well as Cal, of course. Now, as for the Mantis Crew, they would begin rebuilding Tanalorr, with Grease working on his saloon, of course. And besides that, they would assist the Hidden Path network with transporting Force sensitives to Tanalorr, as well as other safe worlds across the galaxy, once they were able to understand how to travel to Tanalorr and back. After a few weeks of assisting the Hidden Path network, they would end up meeting up with Bail Organa, and would align with his resistance movement, and then later on, Mon Mothmas too. A big thing that helped the Hidden Path and Bail assisting each other was the fact that the Mantis Crew actually ended up helping Obi-Wan in transporting Leia back to Alderaan, and the fact that Tanalorr would just be the perfect place for the rebellion to build. Now, while the Mantis Crew were helping the Hidden Path, Eno Cordova would stay at Tanalorr just to keep the Jedi Temple safe, and to start understanding how the Force worked at this planet. Now, Cere sometimes stayed there, but when it came to meeting Obi-Wan, she would attend with the rest of the Mantis Crew. They did try to convince him to join the path on Tanalorr, but he stated he had his own mission, but he would definitely see if he could potentially move his mission, aka Luke, to Tanalorr. That might take a bit of convincing, but it was probably possible. Also, if it meant that Luke could be safe from the Empire, that would be even better. So besides that, they would assist Obi-Wan in rescuing Leia from Nur. And pretty much most of the events happen except for the glass breaking, as there were more Jedi to help now, and Cal, of course, did his legendary wall run across the glass, deflecting all the blaster shots, so luckily no one had to drown. Otherwise, some of those stormtroopers were definitely going to drown, and it wouldn't be pretty. And the only other thing that changed was the fact that no T-74 airspeeders or their pilots would be killed because Cal would fight Reva instead of her getting a chance to destroy the T-74 airspeeders, which Cal would win the fight, and he offered Reva a chance to leave the Empire behind, which he usually did. But Reva rejected this offer as she had her own plans, and Cal could sense what she was going to do, which meant he knew that he had to get out of there quickly because Vader was on the planet. So he would knock her out and destroy her lightsaber just so she couldn't attack them, and he escaped with the rest of the crew on the Mantis, as well as with the JT-73-1 Broadhorn transport. Now, the reason why the Stinger Mantis ship was able to get into Nur was because Merrin ended up using her talisman. After their escape, BD-1 would notice Leia's droid Lola and went to go say hi to Lola, which he then noticed that there was a restraining bolt. Just noticed that there was a restraining bolt on the droid, so BD-1 told Cal about it, which Cal told Obi-Wan and Leia grabbed the droid before it could escape, and so Leia would take the restraining bolt off and give it to Cal, which he would crush it with his hand, and then stomp on it to make sure it couldn't stay active. Wasn't really necessary, but it was just for good measure. And basically, similar things played out to how it did in the Obi-Wan show. Back on Nur, Vader was furious with Reva, and he just force choked the heck out of her. But Reva would explain to him that she had planted a hidden tracker on their ship so they could track Obi-Wan and the other Jedi wherever they went. Obviously, the tracker being on the droid. But Reva would later find out that there was no tracker anymore, and she realized that they'd figured it out. Reva would end up stealing the fifth brother's lightsaber in his sleep, and she would then escape and would end up leaving Nur, but she had to figure out how she was going to kill Vader. Back to the Mantis crew in the hidden path, they would arrive at Jabeam and then transport the refugees to Tenalor in the hopes of potentially of rebuilding a Jedi Order there, as well as to keep the refugees safe and build a rebellion to combat the Empire. Obi-Wan would go with Leia to return her to Alderaan, and would end up going with the Mantis crew to convince Yoda to rejoin the Jedi Order and help build this new order they are building. It obviously would take them a few more hours to convince him, but they would ultimately convince him, and they would end up taking him to Tanalorr. Obi-Wan, of course, was dropped off at Tatooine to see Luke, but he also explained to Owen and Beru that they had a secret planet that the Empire couldn't find, and they felt that it would be safer for Luke to be on Tanalorr, as he informed them that Anakin was alive, and if he found out about Luke, then he would come for them and he would kill them just to get Luke. Now, Owen and Beru, especially Owen, wouldn't be convinced, weren't open to the idea just yet. So Obi-Wan would inform the Mantis crew and Yoda that he would stay to continue to protect Luke, but also keep convincing them, as perhaps it was safe for the twins to finally know about each other. Over the next 4 years, Yoda, Cere, and Eno would teach Force sensitives that were being brought to Tenalorr by the Hidden Path, which had now grown to 10 safe worlds, with them now having 4 Broadhorn transports and 8 T-47 airspeeders, thanks to some secret financial support from Bail and Mothma. And of course, thanks to the Hidden Path, the Jedi had managed to grow to over 200 Force sensitives, 3 of them including Barriss Offee, Asajj Ventress, and Lyn Rakish. Nearly half of the Force sensitives had volunteered to become Jedi. Elsewhere on Tenalorr, Grease during this time had his saloon built with the help of rebel crew. Now, speaking of rebels, the rebellion would begin to grow during this time, with allies such as the Cloud Riders, the Mon Calamari Exodus fleet, who provided the rebels with their shipyard on Tellarus, members of the Wookiee Resistance, most of them being Wolf Warrow's crew, and Ahsoka's Fulcrum Agency. The Cloud Riders would assist Cal in raiding an Imperial weapons base to supply the rebel troops with blasters, and they would conduct raid on food shipments so they could provide all their personnel and Jedi with food, as well as provide food to Grease's saloon, of course. And another thing that helped was that the Cloud Riders and Cal had successfully captured a Class 4 container transport. Now came 5-4 BBY, where Cal and Bode would assist in the Aldhani heist. Bode would single-handedly capture the communications tower so the other facilities across the planet wouldn't be aware of the occurring heist. Cal would move silently through the night to take out the guards on the wall so they couldn't reinforce the Imperial hostages within the facility. He wouldn't kill them, he would just knock them out. So once the raid was done, Bode would make his way back to the vault, and the rebels escaped, and with very little casualties. Because of Bode and Cal, they actually stole 500 million credits, which would be enough to start funding a true rebellion, even an extra cell. perhaps one as large as the Musashi group. Obviously, a lot of the credits would be going to making sure they could keep certain rebel styles active and alive, just in case they got hit hard by the Empire. And during that year, newly trained Jedi, who also knew how to use blasters by now, as well as a good amount of the Force, went out to assisting people across the galaxy, which ended up in a crazy turn of events, lead to 1,000 more civilians joining the rebellion. Obviously, this didn't come without challenges, of course, because Saw Gerrera's partisans were slaughtering civilians, they captured Imperials, and then executed them, and they just broke every rule of engagement, which just give the Empire more propaganda to use against the rebellion, which was really limiting their growth. But by now, it was nearly impossible to halt the rebellion's growth. And actually, speaking of the Jedi, an important thing to note was the first year was very rough because there weren't that many teachers to teach the Jedi, but they would work together and it would make the teaching process easier, but it would also allow Yoda to see how attachments didn't turn Jedi to the dark side, it actually elevated them and helped them from turning to the dark side. Now, another thing to mention was that there was one more big event that had occurred within 4BBY. The Mantis Crew were tasked with killing Governor Tarkin, while Spectre Unit was tasked to go save Kanan. It was strongly advised against by Fulcrum/Ahsoka, but they did it anyways. And Ahsoka did inform Bail that she had a feeling Hera might try and save Kanan. Now, Mantis Crew was able to sneak into the Sovereign thanks to Merrin using her talisman, assisted by her Night Sister ancestors, which cloaked the Stinger Mantis, and that's how they got on board the Sovereign. Now, most of the crew would stay in the ship, but Merrin, Cal, and Bode, who once again joined them, would be covered in Ichor to sneak in and kill Tarkin, which they would make it to the command bridge, and then Cal would shove his lightsaber through Tarkin, after cutting a hole through the door, scaring away the rest of the officers, which they let them go. Although some of them would try to attack the Jedi. They would also be killed, which also included Admiral Constantine, but the retreating officers did survive. And after that, everything else kind of happened. But Palpatine would just be absolutely furious. He didn't know that it was the rebels on Lothal, but he was told that some invisible Jedi killed Tarkin, which just completely confused him. Dathomirian witch magic, maybe. But that couldn't be right, because they were all killed. So he would warn Vader about that, and Vader would still be sent to Lothal in order to try and access the world between worlds. Because whatever was going on, Palpatine needed to go back in time to stop this from happening. A couple months later, Mantis Crew would be called to assist Spectre units with their mission to Lothal in order to rescue Minister Tua, but unfortunately, it would end up going awry, with Tua being in the center of an exploding shuttle, which was done to make the rebels look like terrorists. So the new plan for the rebels was to escape. However, this time they would make their way back to the platform they originally arrived on, as Cal could sense Vader was here. So the two rebel teams were able to meet back up at the Mantis and escape Lothal, as the ship was invisible again, thanks to Merrin using her talisman, and of course thanks to Grease's expert piloting skills. And it also didn't help for the Empire that the new Sector Fleet Admiral, Admiral Nepelio, basically the same as Admiral Constantine. The only problem for the rebels, though, was that Vader now assumed which specific Jedi attacked the Sovereign. And, not to mention, the rebels did not get any list of allies, and they failed to save Minister Tua. They also didn't get the shield generators, but it did mean that Vader wasn't able to track the rebels back to their fleet, so Phoenix Home would be safe. And after that, the Mantis Crew would be sent back to Tanalorr to get a break, except for Cal as usual. But Cal would take a break once he helped the rebels find some more shield generators. During the rest of 4BBY, and throughout the year of 3BBY, most of the events that happened in those 2 years would still occur. The only events that would change was Ahsoka's fight with the fifth brother and seventh sister, as Cal would assist Ahsoka, and they would end up killing them both, as they were too dangerous to be kept alive, and they weren't going to change their ways, so it was necessary in order to protect the new children of the Force, which they would bring these children and their families to Tanalorr. Unfortunately though, Phoenix Cell would still have to escape Gorel, because Seven Sisters ID-10 Seeker Droid showed the commanding Imperial officer on the planet it was on about Ezra talking to a Force-sensitive baby. So that commander would alert Admiral Nepelio, and he would bring the Sector fleets to attempt to destroy the rebels. But they would escape, and the Phoenix Home and most of Phoenix Cell, which had grown a bit more, with a few more CR-90 corvettes, were stationed at Tanalorr. Many of the ships were able to escape, as Cal and the Ghost Crew did end up finding shield generators during early 4BBY. but the rebels now found their base on Adelon, so things worked out for them. And the other two events that occurred were the formation of 5 new rebel cells, thanks to the continued support from the Jedi, going out and helping whoever they could, which was always what the Jedi were meant to do. And besides that, the other event was Malachor, as Yoda didn't see any need to, because the Jedi never needed to seek out a way to destroy the Sith. Vader would never be able to get access to the Lothal Temple. Now come to BBY, and it would be a great year for the rebellion, because they were able to steal 13 Y-Wing bombers from Reclam Station thanks to Cal and Bo assisting the Ghost Crew. Not to mention Ezra never got a Sith holocron, so he would make more logical decisions and wouldn't be as reckless. But it would do a lot of good for them because they would give those Y-Wing bombers to the Massassi group, as well as at least a couple to another big cell they were creating. And yes, they were using some of their Aldani heist credits, as they like to call it, to fund an extra cell, besides the other ones they were funding. But they were also using those credits to fund another 3 small rebel cells that were forming in 2BBY. Unfortunately though, 2 of those would be crushed by Thrawn and Vader, as they were trying to attempt to limit the growing rebellion, which was growing a lot faster now because Tarkin was killed 5 years earlier, and it truly looked like the Empire could actually lose. They were already extremely aggressive to the galaxy, so it got to the point where all most people could do was just fight. This was of course more in the Outer Rim though. There were a few little uprisings in the Mid-Rim, but a lot of those got squashed before they could become proper rebel cells. And as an extra bonus, the rebels were able to steal a lot more credits and proton bombs from the Win Kathu job. And because Maul was still trapped on Malachor, he couldn't really get in their way, so they would never lose a Sphyrna-class corvette. And because Obi-Wan was on Tanalorr now, Ezra would never have to go to Tatooine. However, the rebels made a very tactical decision, which was risky, but it actually worked out really well. Cal, once again, would be covered in ichor, and Ezra would be dressed as a bounty hunter. So Cal would secretly be with Ezra without the Imperial officers knowing. And later on, when they were aboard Thrawn's Star Destroyer, he would enter his office, and Cal would wait a few seconds, and then ignite his lightsaber and kill Thrawn in an instant. And the problem for Thrawn is that while he was extremely intelligent, Jedi, like Cal, were very unpredictable, especially when they were covered in witch magic, which was very unpredictable for Thrawn. And the stormtroopers who were outside his office would come into the room to investigate, but Callus, who was in the training room, would reprogram and activate the sentry droids to kill the 2 stormtroopers that came in to see them beating up Thrawn. And even the stormtroopers would get killed as well. It was a bit of a brutal look, but eventually those droids would get destroyed once enough Imperial forces came into the room to destroy them, and they were able to make it look like Lieutenant List was still behind this whole thing. But Yularen did think it was someone else, but he would never be able to figure out who. And they did end up letting Governor Price live because they didn't have time to kill her. Also, they didn't need to kill everybody. They just needed to kill certain individuals at certain times, which is why they were always very specific when using ichor. This was a bit out of luck though, because Ezra didn't know that Thrawn's Star Destroyer was going to be at Lothal at this current time. Because Thrawn was killed closer to the end of the year, the Massassi group would send some of their forces to assist Phoenix Cell in destroying the TIE Defender factory, which they would. And then they would retreat with a astounding rebel victory to inspire the people to fight back against the Empire. And Vader wasn't there by this time because he had to go try and find other Jedi that have been rumored to survive. And then within 1 BBY, Callus was able to gain some information about the Death Star after Ezra and Saw intercepted a Kyber crystal shipment to Jedha. And luckily, there were actually 30 Jedi on the planet of Jedha. So when Bode Rook would be sent to Jedha, Saw Gerrera's partisans would capture Rook, but some of the Jedi on the planet were secretly in the mountains close to the partisans, and they would end up killing them all. Because to be fair on the Jedi and the rebels, these were terrorists who were harming too many civilians, and plus they needed Bode Rook. So he would give the Jedi the information about Galen Erso being on Eodu, and about Project Stardust, which was the Death Star. So then the Cloud Riders, led by Cal, would end up rescuing Galen Erso. They did take a bit of heavy losses within their own cell, but their own rebel cell was starting to gain a few members too. And because Adelon never got found, the rebel cells would still be their own cells, but would start to grow a bit, which meant that the Massassi group would send Red, Blue, Yellow, and Green Squadron, Phoenix Cell would send Phoenix Squadron, and the Mon Calamar and Exodus fleet would send the Profundity, which had Admiral Raddus aboard it, who would lead this assault on the Death Star, as they found out it was on Jedha. After stowing away in a Zeta-class heavy cargo shuttle, those Jedi would work towards shutting down the shields, which they would, and then they would make their escape in an Imperial shuttle that was also set to leave, as the Jedi were very specific on timing, because throughout the 9 years, they had to be very specific on when they stowed away on ships and when they escaped them. This was obviously a large battle station. They gave the Rebel fleet an all clear. The Rebel fleet jumped out of hyperspace, and Hera Syndulla aboard the Ghost would lead the Starfighter assault. And the fight against the TIE fighters was extremely rough, but Luke Skywalker, who had been piloting an X-Wing at this point, didn't need to use the navigator and would use the Force to guide him to destroy the Death Star at the right exact moment, as Galen Erso had given them a bit of an idea on how to destroy the Death Star, as other Jedi in the galaxy had actually managed to sneak into the Scarif base, as they were aware that the Death Star project was on Scarif. They would end up getting the Death Star plans and escaping, but unfortunately they couldn't download the rest of the plans. So that's how the rebels knew how to destroy the Death Star. So once those proton torpedoes made it into the small little hole in the trench, the Death Star went kaboom! The Rebel Alliance did unfortunately lose their temple on Jedha after a long, wide search, but 3 of the Jedi would be able to escape. So the Rebels and the Jedi would learn about the attack, and so they would have to be very careful of how they fight the Empire, because the Empire were already becoming increasingly hostile and aggressive, and not just to them, but to the entire galaxy. This was mainly because of the loss of Tarkin and Thrawn, but now they were probably going to increase it even more, because the Empire just lost the Death Star to the Rebels, and Director Krennic as well. So the Jedi knew that they needed to put an end to the Sith sooner, and they could definitely start with the Inquisitors and Vader. And an opportunity for the Rebels would occur, as they were contacted by Reva, similar to how Minister Tua contacted the Rebels. She explained that Vader was on Mustafar, and she wanted revenge on Vader, so she was willing to offer a temporary alliance to defeat Vader. Obi-Wan, Luke, Yoda, Ahsoka, Leia and Cere would go to Mustafar, while Cal, Ezra and Kanan, as well as the other 31 Jedi, would go to Nur to hopefully eliminate the remaining Inquisitorius. Also, just as an extra note, everyone knew Anakin Skywalker was Vader, so they were going to try one more time to turn Anakin to the light. Otherwise, they would kill him once and for all. On Nur, the Jedi arrived with a stolen Imperial shuttle and an invisible Stinger Mantis. The Imperial shuttle would carry the 31 Jedi, and the ship would be flown by Rex and Kanan, and there they would be able to eliminate the remaining Inquisitors, which really was just the first brother, and a couple other Inquisitors in the area, as most of them had already been killed, so it was pretty easy. As for the fleet above Mustafar, there would be another Imperial shuttle that actually carried former Fourth Sister and Ventress, as they were 2 extra Jedi that were sent to assist the fight by taking out the fleet. Now, as for the ground on Mustafar, the Jedi would arrive there, and Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Luke would land on a rocky surface not too far from a lava pit, while Cere, Leia, and Ahsoka would go and sabotage the Imperial garrison on the planet. And as for Vader, he would sense that Obi-Wan and Yoda were here, and another Jedi he wasn't entirely familiar with, but he would go out to fight them, because he could understand they were here to challenge him. And Vader wanted revenge, so this would be his perfect opportunity to finally strike down Obi-Wan once and for all. Plus, he never got a chance to fight him in 9BBY, so Vader was seething with anger, wanting to kill Obi-Wan. Vader would meet Obi-Wan and Yoda, and immediately the fight began. Their lightsabers would clash, with Vader using Form 5, the gem So/Scene, while Obi-Wan used Form 3 Ceresu to defend from Vader's aggressive use of Form 5. And Yoda would just be jumping around, almost running rings around Vader, trying to kill him. It was obviously a bit harder for Yoda in his age, but he was still pretty effective for the most part. And Luke would do something similar, as Luke did learn a lot of cool Jedi techniques, and they would move through the fiery pits, but the Jedi knew they had an order to protect, so Obi-Wan would change his defensive form to Form 6 Ataru, and he would strike Vader's life support system, as well as part of his helmet, which they would officially confirm that it was Anakin behind that mask. And Obi-Wan and Yoda would reveal that Luke was Vader's son, which truly shocked Vader, and Luke asked him why he would betray the Jedi, why he would betray his mother, his sister. He realized that Padme had given birth to 2 twins, and while Palpatine didn't know about the Skywalker twins, it just showed that Palpatine lied to him further. Now, as for Reva, she would try to kill Vader, but Yoda would stop her and explain that it was over. Her time for revenge was over, and it would hurt Reva a lot, because she had been waiting all this time to kill Vader, but Yoda would wait patiently until she calmed down, which she eventually would. Now, as for the Imperial garrison, they would all be destroyed thanks to Cere, Leia, and Ahsoka. And as for the fleet above, the interdictor would get captured by Ventress and Fourth Sister, and they would redirect it to the Imperial Star Destroyer, and they would escape in an Imperial shuttle just in time, and jump to hyperspace while the Imperial Star Destroyer would get damaged. And with that, the Jedi on Mustafar would escape. Now, just to make some clarifications, the Jedi didn't just immediately trust Vader, as Vader had killed countless Jedi and Rebels. But over the next couple of months, Vader would prove to the Jedi that he had truly changed, and that he truly was Anakin Skywalker again. The way Vader proved this was by giving the Rebels whatever Imperial secrets he could, even though this would be very challenging because Palpatine could easily find out. So Vader was very careful of how many victories he gave the Rebels, and the Rebels were aware of that. Now, after those 2 months, Vader had managed to get an idea of what the Imperial Defense Fleet on Coruscant was like and how they could get through the fleet. So the Jedi would make their attack on Coruscant by sneaking through Coruscant's defenders with the help of Rogue Squadron. And Palpatine by this time knew that Vader had betrayed him and gave important Imperial secrets to the Rebels. So Vader would enter his office. Anakin had resurfaced. And Palpatine was also very aware that there were more Jedi around, which probably was a good explanation as to why Vader turned. But what he didn't realize was that Yoda was here until Yoda walked into his office, just like he had done 19 years ago. And Palpatine would attempt to electrocute Vader, but Yoda got in the way and would block it with the Force, which shocked Palpatine, so he pushed harder with his Force lightning. And the other Jedi walked in, and Yoda, through the Force, signaled the other Jedi to walk in, which they all would, and they would help him push it back. Because this wasn't Yoda from the Clone Wars, this was a more peaceful Yoda. This was a Yoda who was truly connected to the Force, and had 9 years to do so. So he, the other Jedi, and now the reborn Anakin, would throw the Force lightning back to Palpatine, and it would completely disintegrate Palpatine in that final moment. But in the final moment, he saw the Jedi, and behind them, only light, which was the Force helping the Jedi to take out the evil that was destroying the balance in the galaxy. Palpatine would attempt to bring himself back through his clone body on Exegol, but it would fail as the clone body wasn't ready yet, so he would end up being killed with the clone body. Once Palpatine was killed, the Jedi would come to discover Exegol after finding and capturing Ochi Bestoon. So Anakin would go to Exegol, as in his mind this was his burden to bear in order to destroy the Sith. So he would go to Exegol and would tear down the entire Citadel, with the Final Order crumbling from within, and the Sith Eternal being wiped out by the crumbling Citadel. And Anakin wouldn't stick around, so he would escape just in time. Palpatine's other created son, besides Anakin, Dathan Palpatine, would stow away in Anakin's ship just before Anakin got to his ship and escaped. And Dathan would go out to find his place in the galaxy, while Anakin would be reunited with his children. And in 5 ABJ, after the Battle of Jedha, Anakin would finally be granted the rank of Jedi Master, with Cal getting the same rank a couple of years before, as Yoda highly rewarded Cal for his bravery, and Cal represented what the Jedi were truly meant to be all this time. And it allowed Yoda to come to see that attachments were not bad, as long as those attachments didn't stop people from saving countless lives over one. And once the war was over, Cal would end up taking an apprentice of his own, which would be a young Twi'lek girl named Star Luna. And she had a very similar personality to Cal. Other Jedi such as Kanan would end up teaching his son Jason the ways of the Force, while Obi-Wan would have Leia as his Padawan, and Anakin would have Luke and Ahsoka as his Padawans. Ahsoka was still Anakin's Padawan as she never got to finish her training, so they allowed Ahsoka to be Anakin's Padawan just so he could finish her training, which wouldn't take too long. Now as for Bode, he had been training Carter in the ways of the Force, and she would end up adopting similar styles to Bode, who had now become a more calm and collected Jedi, thanks to the help with his Jedi peers around him. As for the rest of the galaxy, after the Jedi escaped, the Empire did find out about Palpatine's murder, of course, and after that, Mos Amedda would become the new Chancellor after announcing Palpatine was murdered. But by this time, Bail had fled to the rebellion after Operation Cinder was activated. It had become very clear to him and even more people across the galaxy, including the Core, Mid-Rim, Inner Rim, and of course the Outer Rim, that the Empire had just completely lost their minds, which actually led to many Imperials deserting as well. Most of them would flee to help the rebellion and show all the Empire's weaknesses, including weaknesses that the rebels didn't even know the Empire had. And as an extra side note, Agent Kallus had fled to the rebellion a couple of years before and just fully committed to assisting the rebellion. Now the Empire was still a pretty big force, but they'd end up crumbling within a year as the rebels had a lot of ships they could use, and a lot of people donated their ships secretly to assist the rebels whenever they could. And of course, the rebels finally used the full might of their secret big rebel cell that I had mentioned earlier. And as for the Executor class Dreadnought, it would be made, but a Jedi strike team would end up capturing the Executor class Star Destroyer, as the Empire never saw it coming, and they would end up using it to help the rebels in fighting the Empire, as well as dismantling Operation Cinder as well. And by 2 ABJ, the final battle would be at Jakku, where 98% of the Imperial forces would be crushed, as well as across the galaxy. And obviously Imperial remnants still formed, but they would eventually crumble, as the Jedi in Hidden Path were able to find them. And another reason why the Jedi were able to find the Imperial remnants was because they had actually gone back to Ilum, and they discovered the construction of Starkiller Base. So that would be another campaign of its own, and within a year, the Imperial remnants without Thrawn would fall. And the people, while a little bit scared of the Executor, still supported the rebellion, as the rebellion promised that when they destroyed the Empire, they would dismantle it. But after the Imperial remnants crumbled, the New Republic was born. The Jedi would be allowed to be a part of the New Republic, which they would, but it was more just a collaborative effort for the most part, with the Jedi doing a lot of the work for the Republic by supporting people across the galaxy. The New Republic still helped people, and the Hidden Path was allowed to be kind of like a separate government sect within the New Republic that was meant to help with refugees, or just help with supporting people across the galaxy. And they would spend a whole year ending the piracy issues, as well as the criminal organizations that were across the galaxy. And the New Republic wouldn't demilitarize until 9 ABJ. And obviously they didn't demilitarize all of their forces, just most of them. But they had a home fleet and a defense fleet, just in case there was ever another big threat in the galaxy. And as for the Chancellor of the New Republic, Mon Mothma would become the New Republic Chancellor, with Bail Organa next in line. As for the Yoda, unfortunately in 5 ABJ, Yoda would pass away, but he would have Cere become the next Grand Jedi Master. And after that, Cal would be next in line, as Yoda felt that those two were the perfect Jedi to lead the New Order. And when Yoda passed away, he would be surrounded by the Jedi Order, and after his passing, they and the galaxy would mourn the loss of Yoda. But he would always be remembered, as well as all the other heroes in the galaxy that fought to save the galaxy. But by this time, Anakin had completely rekindled his relationship with his children and the Jedi, and Anakin and Obi-Wan would become brothers again. Bode and Kata would still have a great father-daughter relationship, and Cal and Merrin, by 4 ABJ, would end up getting married on Tanalorr and would have a child 3 years later. So Bode would become Uncle Bode, just like Cal was Uncle Cal to Kata. And during the 6 years of peace, the galaxy would completely thrive, with the Jedi rebuilding their reputation and setting up Starlight Beacon again in order to protect a galaxy that would remain a peaceful place for civilians, the New Republic, and of course the Jedi themselves, all thanks to Bode telling Cal the truth. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Let's talk about the story, shall we? So, originally this story was going to be pretty short, actually, but I decided I wanted to actually make it a bit longer and explore how Cal and Cere, because Bode tells Cal the truth, I want to explore how they could impact the Star Wars galaxy as well as the canon timeline. And I also felt like having Bode over here talks about Cal defeating the Ninth Sister was the best way to get him to tell Cal the truth, because maybe he could because he could see that Cal could potentially protect his daughter and him. He could see that Cal could help him protect his daughter from threats like Inquisitors. And I also wanted to explore here and there as to how there would be conflicting ideologies between Yoda and Cal. Because Yoda and somewhat Obi-Wan don't believe in the attachment rule, but Cal and other newer Jedi don't believe in that same rule. And towards the end of the video, I wanted to explore how Jedi... And towards the end of the video, I had a very... And towards the... And closer to the end, it wasn't the most... The final battle wasn't the most climactic thing, but I really felt like the Jedi would just be able to defeat Palpatine with the Force helping them. As the Jedi, especially Yoda, who is very powerful in the Force, had time, a lot of time actually, to grow in the Force. And Palpatine would only be focusing on the dark side, not lightsaber combat. And also, I feel like at this time, the Force would just kind of want to... I feel like at this time, the Force would just have a... I feel like at this time, the Force would have just had enough of Palpatine. And with enough Jedi, they'd be able to defeat him easily. And with the Force helping the Jedi, Palpatine would be defeated somewhat easily. It would still be a struggle, though. And now, let's move on to the announcements. So, the Kalani video is still in the works. It's still on its way. But there will be two first ever Clone Wars What If videos that will be coming out. And once the Mandalorian and Grogu movie comes out and Ahsoka Season 2, I will be officially working on Tianic G4811's Zan's Consortium video, which I'm very excited for actually. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the story. You guys are awesome, and I'll see you guys next time on The Alternate Star Wars Galaxy.